I'm from a company called SCG Group, and my background is actually specialising in education. So I used to be a safeguarding strategic lead, a SEN officer, and part of my main responsibility was looking after emergency plans in schools. So anything through evacuation, lockdown, and also evacuation, thinking about keeping people safe in specific spaces. Now, we actually ran a webinar because we ended up getting a load of traction from people asking, what do we do? How does this impact us? Can we utilise what we have already in terms of telephony, which you absolutely can, because it's about saving money but also mitigating risks. So when we spoke to several people, they said, yeah, we use our comms solution for things like recording calls, transferring, being able to use things like reception, and we were like, brilliant, but how would you harness the power of your telephony in an emergency? And there were lots of really good questions that came back. There was one sensory school we spoke to who have 60 classrooms. They had a really long corridor, and at the end of this corridor was their sensory room, and they had no comms coming in and out. They had an emergency where a child had an epileptic seizure, and they weren't able to call out for 10 to 15 minutes until somebody came to their aid. So it was a massive safeguarding issue, and the fallout with the parents was really, really poor for that school. So it was thinking about how we could page in emergencies immediately to wherever it needs to go in that vicinity. And then also with schools, a couple of years ago, there needed to be a different sound alarm. So when you have the fire alarm go off for evacuation, you also have a separate alarm, which we refer to as a security alert, which goes out for a lockdown, so it's completely distinctive between the two. So what we did next, after having this big webinar, is we spoke to industry specialists, just like Jodie from the Protect Alliance, to tell us what we needed to do to help support our product set with aligning with compliancy with Martin's Law. So this was a quote I directly took from Lisa Broad, who is a counter-terrorism consultant. She's worked from the Home Office for 18 years and also is a DFE expert for 5 of them. She said, what we have to remember is Martin's Law is one enabler of a strategy that already exists. Schools and businesses should already have effective lockdown plans in place. They should already be considering the risk from terrorism. And unfortunately, the support and guidance has not always been there from the government. And Martin's Law will help to mandate this. And the main thing is, law or not, it should be absolutely happening now, which is why taking action is so important. So the expectation from the DFE and government is that measures implemented by your school, business, nursery are proportionate. And we've heard from some really, really great talkers today about vehicle mitigation. We'll hear about rapid response kits in emergency, enabled to help people in secure environments. And then in most cases, there's low cost or no cost for changes. So there's things like training, there's things like risk assessments you can carry out on your own premises. And this really helps keep people safer during any type of security incident without causing additional burden on the workforce, which is massively key. Now, what I've done is I've put some writing which will be shared with you afterwards. So if you like any of the presentations and you want to reflect on what we've said, all the information will be there to find. So what does this look like for an emergency plan? Now, back when I was doing it, there were 2 things I used to focus on. Settings should have plans in place to respond effectively to different types of incidents. If an incident does arise, staff should be able to really draw on their knowledge from plans and make good informed judgments about how to help keep people safe and themselves within that site. Settings should also test their plans to make sure they are suitable and effective. So when we were speaking to a number of businesses and also schools, they were saying, we have sufficient plans in place. And I said, great, let's actually have a look what it looks like on paper. But the practical side of it, we had so many people that were doing whistleblowing, we had so many people that had cardboard cutouts. And it said lockdown in effect, and then they had to walk between each school classroom to say this is happening. And it was just one of those things where you just think, well, that intruder's already come into the school. They've already caused damage. What could we do to prevent that further? So it's thinking about practice drills, absolutely test those drills. Considerations must be taken around individual trauma, particularly around those learners who have previously been affected by incidents, and also sensory and additional needs too. So we had a load of requests start coming in. And we have to think about not just mainstream people, but people who might have sensory specialist needs, who can't hear. This college who wrote into us have a big sensory zone, and they also have a horticultural village. So they said, we'd like to use the power of our telephony to be able to broadcast to different zones with different messages. We also need to think about meeting the needs of these people by having visual alerters. And that could be having really steady strobe lights which don't affect people with epilepsy, but also you can have speakers with text that comes underneath which tells you exactly what to do. Because let's face it, in an emergency, it's a fight or flight response or we freeze. So if we've practiced it and we know what we're doing, we absolutely know how to respond to it. So basically what it says, if you can't read it at the back, we're looking at amending and improving our business continuity plan by incorporating a mass communication system suitable for an educational establishment. A system can help to implement counter-terrorism measures to assist with our emergency evacuation, lockdown, critical incidents and day-to-day communication. They had 2 campuses and a lot of area to cover in terms of car parks, the horticultural village I mentioned earlier, and they said we need visual alerts because we don't want a stampede, which you can understand. And it was in the city centre as well, so anywhere that needed to be broadcast also needed to let the local community know what was happening if there was a big event within the college. So it's a really, really useful conversation we had with them. So preparing for this and being compliant. Whenever a new law comes out, there's always something that stipulates that. And we think, well, how do we actually prove, instead of ticking boxes or just ticking boxes, it's going, what ISOs can I actually think they're relevant and I can apply them to what I'm doing policy-wise? So one of them was dealing with health and safety and a clause for emergency preparedness. And the other one was dealing with business continuity, which is a greater emphasis in the recovery phase. The key thing is both of these incorporate the need for legal compliance, and it's about being better prepared by having that training. And things which were flagged by other people today are things like ACT training, which is free to do via the Protect UK website. And there's loads of useful information where you can help build better, more stable plans. In terms of responding in an emergency, we're looking at guide, shelter, communicate, as far as Martin's Law comes in, guiding people to a safe space, keeping them sheltered for several hours, and there's a couple of different routes here. If it's a lockdown, we're talking about physically locking down doors, windows, physical items in that area. If you're thinking about somebody who is a physical person, then it would be under desks or potentially behind fire doors and things like that. And then it's the way this is communicated. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about sending out a sound alert, which might not be appropriate. It could be a visual alert. And there's lots of ways to do this. So for terrorist attacks or threats, of the utmost importance to be more prepared. You should always look for support with professionals to find the correct policies and procedures. There's so much misinformation out there, so I'd highly advise to speak to experts within certain zones that you're thinking about getting services from. When there's alarm or warning triggered for an evacuation or evacuation process, you have to think about how you want to enact that. So as an example, you could hit a button, which would sound like that, and that would have everything on it that you needed. So it could be an evacuation protocol, it could be lockdown, it could be to even broadcast a message if there's a live event happening and you want to make everybody aware of what's going on and where to go. So every organisation that hits the criteria should have a plan in place, which includes training for staff, communications and practice drills. Now I'm hoping that this video will work so you can actually see it in action.
Do you have strict emergency plans in place for evacuation, evacuation or lockdown procedures?
Are staff trained in operating these plans? Do you run practice drills or exercises to rehearse these plans?
Do you have a dedicated solution in place?
Now you can ensure that all members of the public are safe on your premises with our tannoy transmitter, the ultimate solution for VoIP environments.
This device offers not just communication, but tailored instruction for every part of your facility.
Operate seamlessly by dialing an extension number, entering an optional PIN for secure access, and deliver area-specific instructions for evacuations and lockdowns.
To ensure the correct instruction is given in the right area, you can broadcast different messages out of speakers in various parts of the building, all at the same time.
This is an evacuation. Please exit through the main library entrance and make your way to the field. Please exit via the back entrance located next to the sports hall and make your way to the field.
Select from 9 pre-recorded announcements, versatile enough to guide personnel during evacuations and lockdowns.
Enhance security by connecting VoIP speakers to maglock doors, providing a comprehensive lockdown solution with area-specific control.
Cancel broadcasts easily with a call, selecting the option to end the message and swiftly return to regular operations.
You can have music play in the background of events, or to signal the change of class lessons.
Experience the power of adaptable communication with our tannoy transmitter, where every message is delivered precisely where and when it's needed.
This is an example setup, so you can either do it via your existing handsets, you could press that emergency button or a mobile phone, and then this is where the paging comes into its own. So you can have speakers, you can have visual alerters and display speakers which will have text, as I mentioned earlier, and then visual alerters like different coloured lights which respond differently in times of strobe. So questions and things that are really, really good to consider moving forwards. So do you have evacuation plans in place, evacuation plans or lockdown procedures? Are staff trained in operating these plans? Do you often run practice drills just like you would with a fire safety protocol? Absolutely do the same thing for the other procedures. Thank you. Are staff trained in operating these plans? Do you run practice drills or exercises to rehearse them? Have you got a dedicated solution in place? And are you compliant? And then I've written down a few key things to consider. So dedicated sounds, messages if you need them, and then different activation methods and visual alerts. Thank you very much.